Protesters stormed the residence of Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Weeks of violent demonstrations across the South Asian country have killed at least 300 people. In an address to the nation, the army chief confirmed Hasina had resigned and fled the country. He urged people to trust in the military to restore calm and ensure those responsible for the killings are punished.
The country is witnessing a period of revolution right now. I had invited all the leaders of political parties. They came here and we had a good discussion. We have decided to form an interim government. Through the interim government, the functioning of the country will take place. I'm giving you my word that we will bring justice for all the killings and the injustice that has happened. Have faith in the army, the armed forces.
The protest started last month with a demand to end quotas in government jobs reserved for relatives of people who fought in the War of Independence more than 50 years ago. There was a pause in the demonstrations after the Supreme Court scrapped most quotas, but students came back to the streets demanding justice for the families of those killed and the resignation of the Prime Minister. More than 90 people were killed on Sunday alone, including 13 police officers, when demonstrators attacked a police station. The army has promised to form an interim government, but there are concerns about lack of trust in the military among the protesters.
This is really a population that has been looking for accountability and justice for some years now under an increasingly authoritarian Awami League regime. So that will be crucial. I think the big fear now, should be that there may be reprisals and violence against followers of the ruling party. I think this is something that everyone's really worried about. And we're really hoping that the army is able to keep the peace, as well as introduce some kind of interim system that can deliver us back to democracy in Bangladesh.
After the army chief spoke, a group which has spearheaded the anti-government protest released a statement saying the military is not the solution. The students and the public will decide who will be appointed to the interim government, it said. 76-year-old Hasina won a fourth straight term in January this year. The election was boycotted by the main opposition party. Her party, the Awami League, has been accused of rights abuses and corruption for years. Hasina's resignation and fleeing the country is being widely celebrated across Bangladesh. But restoring calm, assuring accountability and trust in a military that is itself accused of widespread abuse poses a huge challenge in the days and weeks ahead. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera.
People have been out celebrating. The army has said that they will fulfill the demands of the people. They will move to a transitional government and then hold free and fair elections. But there is concern about an unstable political situation and also how they might try and contain perhaps security risks as tensions are still running high following the departure of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina from the government and from the country. Earlier on, I spoke to Irene Khan, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of the right to freedom of opinion and expression. She says that the army is already having an impact on the streets.
There's jubilation in the streets. I was out there. I saw the people celebrating. First and foremost, I think the army has stopped further bloodshed, and that is very important. There are hundreds of thousands, some say about 1 million people converging on Dhaka right now. People have confidence in the army. This crowd some of them were shaking hands with the soldiers. So at least the bloodshed has stopped. The army has a very tough job ahead right now. It has promised to create an interim government. And we are all hoping that the transition will be peaceful and that there will be accountability for all the human rights violations that have taken place recently, including the killing of about 300 people in the last 3 weeks. And then, of course, Bangladesh has an enormous task ahead. It is not the poster child of sustainable development anymore. The previous government had driven this country into despair, and there would be a lot of hard work to do to build it up. But most of all, I think it's extremely important that the army respect human rights.
As you say, the army commands a great deal of respect in the country, but the student protesters reject a military government. They don't want that. So How fragile is the situation going to be right now in terms of what they will do to introduce an interim system that will bring the country back to democracy?
No one, not just the student leaders, no one in the country wants military rule again. This country's gone through that. They've just overthrown an authoritarian leader, so they're not looking forward to long-term military rule. These are very early time, just a couple of hours. And the commander-in-chief spoke, made a public statement in which he talked about an interim government. I think people will be watching very closely to see who he puts into that interim government to make sure that it is an inclusive government and a civilian government. So this is a question of transition. I think if the army believes that it can control this country through military rule, it only has to look at the streets. You can see the people out there. Effectively, people peacefully, without arms, have overthrown an authoritarian regime. That is incredible.
What sort of timeline for that would you be comfortable with?
I think a few months, because we also know that around the world there is plenty of examples where the army comes in with all good intentions and then stays on. And we would not like to see that happening in this country. It is not good for the people. It's not good for the human rights situation in this country. I think the army will find a lot of cooperation, a lot of support for a speedy but effective and peaceful transition to democratic rule again.
What are the other immediate challenges in terms of security, for example, reprisal attacks which might take place, particularly for the violations over the past few weeks that you mentioned?
Yes, I think that's a very good point. Right now, we saw on television that the crowds had moved into Ganabhavan, which is the Prime Minister's official residence that she had just vacated literally an hour or so ago. They had gone in and they were picking up things. I wouldn't say looting, but certainly they were picking up things as though they were souvenirs. And the crowds are everywhere. So the likelihood of things getting out of hand is, of course, there. And that is, I think, probably the army chief's biggest problem right now. But if he has a lot of goodwill, he has brought in the various opposition political parties into this conversation. He's about to go see the president now. And I hope he will include civil society and bringing people in, bringing the students in, bringing other parts of civil society in. And also the business people, that's really the way to go forward.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.